to my little brother, he is reignited by previously sparse and admittedly vague history regarding the Karate Kid series thanks to a little something called Cobra Kai. Having this classic film series transition into a TV series-like format had the potential to have many benefits, but also potential detractors peel back to the surface and have it wear out its welcome. To my complete surprise, I had absolutely nothing to worry about. Cobra Kai is actually pretty damn good. 1/4 teen soap opera, 1/4 martial arts epic, 1/4 underdog sports drama, 1/4 80s cheese box, and all parts total badass. From its mostly hammy acting, careful crafted of lovable outsider ruthless jock characters, solid cinematography and editing, it has a very indicative structure that's self-aware enough of its own existence with just the right amount of respect going into every detail and backstory present from the original movie and onwards. There were honestly so many things about this series that I can honestly consider worthy of making the franchise within itself an angelic progression on how to do a continuation, one of the many reasons I'm tremendously excited for Season 4. Having to narrow myself down to what was my best or most enjoyable aspect of the show was a struggle within itself, especially with the next season dawning so closely, but I decided, why not toss myself into the deep end of the pool and tie an anchor around my ankles to find out. So without any further ado, here are my top 10 favorite moments from Cobra Kai Season 1 all the way to Season 3. Number 10, student becomes the master. It's become one of those tricky phrases that has become recycled so many times during the course of history, which as a result only serves to further obscure its true origins. I'm not even really sure that the student has become the master is actually a direct representation of his original quote. But neither is what I'm about to talk about. But man, this was such a good moment, I had to put it on this list. It all just boils down to this one little moment right here.
What'd you say?
You're the one giving up.
I don't know what the heck.
Quiet!
I just love every second of this scene. Miguel immediately shutting Johnny down and berating him for letting Kreese take the dojo and refusing to stand up for his students that he had inherited before Kreese even came back, making him look like a pushover and a weak teacher. The fact that Johnny didn't even competently come up with a surefire comeback to that only proved how much in the right Miguel was, and it's a testament to how Johnny operated in business and in life. Either somebody either gives up on him or he completely walks out on even trying to put himself back together whenever something goes wrong, and it goes back to the bottle each and every time. Whether it be his own son putting his top student in a coma, him being financially severed, or any other relegated situation. And the best part about this scene, it ended up being therapeutic for both men. Johnny somehow cured Miguel's physical paralysis and gave him the ability to walk again, while Miguel gave him a big enough reality check for him to actually focus on honing in his emotional paralysis. Johnny actually began to stand his ground after that. He went up to school a couple days later and told his former students how messed up he was for leaving them out to dry, while also making it very clear that despite not being the best role model, he at least gave a shit about those kids and where they want to go in life. It's in that reaffirming of authority that he actually does get some of his students back in his corner just in time to form Eagle Fang Karate. God, it's such a stupid name, but I love it. It is a little annoying that Johnny is able to give Miguel the time of day more than Robbie, especially when the latter needs it the most. But this was a well-needed concrete dose of reality that this character really needed to be hit with in order to help mature quicker and properly. Here's hoping that Season 4 actually continues that trend. Number 9, fantasy versus reality. Okay guys, be honest now, how many of us are familiar with bullying stories? Look, we've all heard a story similar to that as we grew up, and how some of us have even lived through that story. So when the story actually takes a turn on its head, it really makes you think, doesn't it? So imagine how bizarre that pattern must have been for Hog and Dimitri. Eli changes his look and was outfitted with a new attitude, outfit, and direction, puts up a memorable, if not overly flamboyant performance at the All Valley and gets the girl. But the Cobra Kai mentality starts to dig its fangs way too deep into him, and he turns heel, going against his own friends, forcing Moon to dump him, and burning bridges with literally almost everyone he cared for. On the contrast, Dimitri stays true to himself, gets his ass kicked from time to time but keeps getting back up, slowly learns enough karate to beat his friend and humiliate him, obtains somewhat of an audience only to get his arm broken. Yasmin of all people signs his cast, sensing where the kid is coming from after being humiliated herself, and they proceed to suck each other's faces off. It's such a small series of events that transpire, but when you really put it back to back together, it does help piece apart what makes Dimitri so damn relatable. He never really had to sell his soul to anyone or anything to be recognized or appreciated. He stayed true to himself, allowed the progression in this direction to happen, but didn't allow it to define or change how he viewed others. It's why he stayed loyal to Sam after he got his arm broken, and why he remained hopeful and forgiving towards Hawk in a moment that I'll get to a little bit later. Hawk represents everything that we want to be. Dimitri represents everything that we are, and how hopeful it can be that we can get better. Number 8, We Dem Boys. I could imagine it already being a hassle to try and make Johnny relatable and sympathetic, but I wasn't expecting to feel the same for the rest of Johnny's former high school buddies, let alone the one who told Johnny to put Daniel in a frickin' body bag!
Get him a body bag!
But alas, one episode was all that it took. Taking a break from his regularly scheduled programming, Johnny goes to a hospital one day where he meets former Cobra Kai friends Bobby, Tommy, and Jimmy. Tommy has been diagnosed with cancer, and knowing that he doesn't really have much to live, the four spend the day hanging out so Tommy can spend his final day having good memories. I'm not going to sugarcoat over any of this, and I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can. The vast majority of this episode is surrounding four middle-aged men reflecting back on their troublesome teen years, finally growing more wise and mature for the better, was such a delight after initially hating them in the original movie. It was beautiful. They all talk over their initial crushes for Allie, deduce on Crease's true motives, play some pool, ride the bikes, gaze at the night sky, oh, and kick some ass. How could I forget that? Now sure, nothing out of this world euphoric happens here, but it's one of the more emotional episodes of the series to date, and when you get to how it all ends, it's for good reason. What makes it even more sad is that the actual actor himself who played Tommy passed away shortly after the season was released from liver and kidney-related issues. So a dying actor playing a dying man, giving advice to those who still have time to fix their lives and do better. Truly honorable, and it makes all the more sense how the scene was so powerful. Godspeed, Robert Garrison. Number 7, the All Valley Tournament. No, we're not there yet. We still gotta wait till the new year. No, I'm actually talking about the All Valley that took place during the finale of the first season. Now, I have to admit that I couldn't exactly complete this list without including the All Valley Tournament in some form of capacity, but looking back at it now, I almost didn't include this entry completely. Like, it actually took me a couple of rewatches before I convinced myself that it even deserved to be this high up on the list anyways, and I'll get to why in a little bit, but yeah, outside of Hawk doing his thing, legally and illegally, Miguel doing the should be illegal crane kick because people have already went over that 500,000 times already, the tricky Miyagi double kick that Robbie effortlessly pulled off, and Sam and Aisha coming to some form of truce, there wasn't really anything particularly moment-worthy about the tournament itself. And then it hits me. What gets it on this list is less about the actual context of the tournament, but the presentation behind the whole thing. While nowhere near the masterclass in editing or technical framing as what will come next season, what occurs at the end of Season 1 was a nice throwback to the series' beginnings and the true birth of a new generation of stars for this franchise. The atmosphere that the tournament encompasses brings to light a competitive but hopeful vibe in the sense of carefully seeded storytelling either reaching a crescendo or paying off to lead to another building block for the future. Despite the series of events that came before, there is a sea of optimism buzzing about in the air with mostly everybody really there to just do their best and have a good time, and the characters all play their roles significantly well, especially Johnny and Daniel going face to face yet again, being right back to where it all started. It also helped that we didn't exactly know who was going to win this one. Well, spoilers, it's the title of the show, so that was expected. But on its own, it was a nice guessing game to see whether or not Robin was actually going to pull up the upset, or if Miguel was actually going to take home the gold. Look, the obvious choice was obvious, and the right man in the right dojo won in the end. But looking back at how the bout concluded, the domino effect from this victory at this tournament spelled disastrous consequences for literally everybody involved. And given where that's gotten us now, that can only be seen as a good thing, right? Number 6, Allie returns. Let me just give props to the Cobra Kai writers for making almost every main female character outside of Sam, Aisha, and Tori either well-rounded individuals or just no-nonsense legitimate badasses. Amanda isn't a delight to watch every time she's on screen. Carmen Diaz has way too many valuable bits of wisdom to share. Her mother Rosa is actually pretty funny in some marginal areas. Kumiko and Yuna were both nice nostalgia pieces to Daniel's conviction and his counterbalance. Mood and Yasmin also have some moments to shine also. But then, there's Allie Mills. The high school sweetheart for both Daniel and Johnny made her return to the Karate Kid series in the second to last episode of Season 3 after being teased the previous season, and she has not looked better. Most of her scenes after that are very beautifully acted and highly emotional for the stakes that are present in the final 2 episodes, but the Christmas party scene was just littered with brilliant writing all throughout. Outside of the music, which any original Karate Kid movie fan would recognize, topping off the nostalgic value, the bestowed season tension between the two rivals were broadened out by Allie's voice of reason, and it really speaks to just how surreal the experience must have been for all of them involved. Johnny and Daniel seeing their first love again, someone whom you never forget, and Allie seeing someone she obviously cared very deeply for pushing on with all this turmoil. All the decades of emotional baggage between everybody is laid out flat on the table, bringing the Rashomon effect to light, and Elizabeth Shue's acting highlights the power of said effect, branching out both for maturity and genuine emotion with such class. And can we take a moment here to realize how poetic it is that Allie, being the one who inadvertently started this feud between Johnny and Daniel, is the one who finally put an end to it? I mean, it's about time, because just look at how long it took Daniel and Johnny to finally get on the same page. Every other time they found some sort of common ground, they imploded either a few minutes later or the very next episode. And it got to the point where it was getting so damn monotonous and overdrawn, and it was yeah, let's just say it got annoying really quickly. Now, sure, it had its cool moments because when is their banter ever not funny? But the shine was definitely starting to wear off with the second time around. And just when it was about to get really annoying, this happens. This is the first time I could genuinely see this being long term. Sure, there's bound to be disillusionment and tension along the way, but if the season 4 teaser is anything to write home about, Allie might have finally been that perpendicular thread to glue the broken pieces as to why the former enemies could never seem to coexist. The fact that she's coming back for season 4 may or may not be cause for delight, but let's just take in this moment and rejoice. The woman who indirectly started one of the longest running feuds from the 80s finally, hopefully, nipped this problem in the bud. It's amazing how after all this time, there's still so much respect and admiration that she holds between the two of them.
Merry Christmas, Johnny.
Merry Christmas, LaRusso. Daniel.
35 years, and they all got the closure they needed in one very poignant, well-written scene. Amazing. Number 5, with great power comes great vulnerability. To say that Sam Really? You're really gonna do that now? I'm only halfway through the video. Why can't you? Okay, I see how it is. Anywho, to say Sam LaRusso is a polarizing character in the context of the entire Karate Kid franchise would be putting it mildly. Outside of Robbie and Tori, Sam is the only other character in this series, at least one of the new characters, who I'm heavily conflicted with. From liking her one minute to not liking her the next, it did eventually ring true to me how much this series loves creating complex characters. And even if you can't stomach the thought of liking this girl, the least you could do is relate to Sam's lingering PTSD-induced meltdown over the last few episodes of the previous season. Outside of being injured by Tori, and technically having met her match against someone who has nothing to lose, Sam realized that she was technically the burning bridge that landed both Miguel and Robbie in hot water, and that she was nothing more but a falling rock zone, meaning anybody who stood within a few feet of her was going to literally get hurt, or worse. Sam basically refused to do karate again up at that point, at least until Daniel shared his own story about how his fight with Mike Burns in Karate Kid Part 3 scared him beyond any point of recognition, which eventually talked Sam into getting back into karate. What makes this moment so impactful to me is that while others say she's an unlikable you-know-what and just ended at that, the circumstances from before and after this show that she's anything but. Yes, she's made some really effed up mistakes. Yes, she can come off a little bit of a hypocrite. And yes, she hasn't really had the best track record when it comes to getting people and keeping them, although that's mostly a fault of the writing for the first 2 seasons. But, goddammit, at least she takes responsibility. Unlike Tori, who would rather continue to try and add more fuel to a fire she started, Sam at least took accountability for her part in the tragedy and tried her damnedest to make things better and put out whatever flames she could, playing a big part in her raising money to help get Miguel back up on his feet, as well as apologize to him directly the moment he woke up. The writers really let Sam's humanity shine through most of Season 3, culminating in her finally standing up to Tori again at the house invasion. Her obvious vulnerability in the face of fear and guilt, and yet her persistence to fix her problems instead of run away from them or cause more of them, is pretty much the entire point of this series. She's allowed to screw up, she's allowed to make mistakes and learn from them, she's allowed to be human. If anything, I'm just glad that after 2 straight seasons of her being treated like a drama magnet, Sam was actually allowed to be, you know, a real character. Very nice callback and nice if not decent character development here. And hey, speaking of character development, number 4, flipping the script again. Now that is how you pull off a convincing face turn, people. If there is one thing that has been left ingrained in my brain and carried on throughout my 10 years of watching pro wrestling, it's that one of the most important factors to keep in mind is that sometimes it doesn't depend on the what or why for a face or heel turn to be impactful. Sometimes it just depends on the when and how for that matter. In that case, this is probably the most exquisite example. Ask any Cobra Kai fan who their favorite character is, and 7 times out of 10, they're probably gonna say Hawk. And for good reason too. He starts off shy and timid, but when Cobra Kai makes a resurgence and Hawk applies to join, Johnny forces the former Eli to flip the script his way. If it had ended there, it would have been a nice redemption story on its own, switching up his look and attitude for the better. But then the darkness consumed him. He cut off Eli and arguably became worse than the very thing he once swore to never become, all in the name of being someone better than who he was before. Season 3 is where he starts to see the downfall in his constant persistence, with Chris kicking out his other friends, him being forced to break Dimitri's arm, and him just watching Chris let in the man who nearly killed Miguel. But all of that finally came to a head in the final episode of the 3rd season, where after multiple teases, Hawk finally soars in like the Hawk he is and makes the save for Dimitri, giving us one of the most satisfying moments in the show's duration. It was a poignant, feel-good, highly satisfying culmination of everything that followed before, further benefiting from the when and how the situation unfolded before him. Even when he does become the bully, Hawk's greatest attribute throughout the show is that he is fiercely loyal, but he becomes more increasingly aware that Cobra Kai under Kreese does not share that loyalty or return it. Those he thought were his brothers for life were cast aside for people he despised without warning. He's positioned to become the new top of the stable at Cobra Kai with Miguel's sideline, yet he's overlooked by the very man who nearly killed him. Finally, he finds himself high-fiving Kyler, his greatest tormentor, looking around and realizing that he is fighting with people he hates, that he's now become everything he's once hated. It all comes crashing down on him in an instant. That kick solidifies Eli finally balancing out the Hawk from his true character, and the subtle processing from Dimitri, switching from fear to confusion to relief that his best friend, his binary brother, is back, fills my heart with so much joy. Number 3, redemption and counterbalance. Okay, trust me guys, I know, Johnny's slow and agonizing rise back to sobriety and social comfort made me just as happy as the next guy, but in my personal opinion, Daniel's emotional restability and rediscovery in his passion might have been more immensely satisfying. Yes, he may have had a better relationship with his children and social group of friends compared to Johnny, and he's definitely the more successful of the two, but objectively speaking, Johnny was the better teacher. It kinda sucks to admit that, but that is the honest-to-God truth. Not just because the latter was taught by a mentally broken man who doesn't know how to move on and had to act like a dick about it every chance he got, but because the man at the end of the day, he did know his limits. He at least knew when he had a problem. That was something either Daniel couldn't deal with or just wrap his head around to see the bigger picture. At least until season 3 came around and pretty much turned everything topsy-turvy. Outside of taking responsibility for partially instigating the school fight, he did seek out Johnny's help to find Robbie. It may not have lasted long, but at least the attempt was made to doing so. After that came his trip back to Okinawa. After that came his reunion with Kumiko. And then came Chosen. It's here, at this point, that Chosen essentially forces Daniel to finally learn a thing or two about forgiveness and letting go by basically handing Daniel his ass on a silver platter. Daniel was clearly only just getting back into karate, whereas Sato's teachings have become Chosen's career and lifestyle. It only makes sense that Chosen is now the one on another level compared to Daniel. His changed personality and temperament pretty much says it all. And Yuji Komoto as Chosen really delivered, recapturing the menace of the old version of the character, the young bully overcompensating for his insecurity, before flipping the switch into a kindly, good-natured master, a proud, confident man who has gained strength by conquering his own weakness. Chosen's lesson to Daniel was that offense can be a defense, but it doesn't have to lead to blood. Instead, incapacitate them and then be done with it. A lesson in self-reflection and forgiveness that comes from it as well. It was a great telescope not only back through some martial arts history, but a valuable lesson that very much hit me at home, acting as a bridge between Daniel's past and what might be of his future. From the ashes of this life-altering experience out steps a mostly new Daniel LaRusso, one who actually begins to embrace the importance of forgiveness and stick with it, less likely to judge more rashly and finally willing to, if not put his best foot forward, then at least prioritize the needs of others over his own. Miyagi-Do solidifies itself as one of the best episodes in the series so far, successfully deconstructing two major characters, but also showing tremendous respect to not only the present, but its past as well, integrating those flashbacks so well into the overarching story and giving them more significance than ever before. I think Daniel said it best during the season 4 teaser. Rivalries don't have to last forever. Number 2, the school brawl. I know, right? It's not my number 1. It's perhaps my favorite moment of the series so far, but even I have to admit there's the better one out there. Speaking of which, let's get the elephant out of the room first. Some people are probably going to wonder why I didn't put this brawl higher up on the list, as it probably was the defining moment of Season 2, maybe even the entire series as of right now. I can't say for certain, because again, Season 4 is right around the corner, but I put it off number 1 for 2 reasons. First of all, despite the passionate and palpable pains of our teen roster, it did come off a rather predictable love rectangle between Tori, Sam, Miguel, and Robbie that was guaranteed to set off some fuses at some point. What came after that may have been a lot of fun, sure, but it wasn't exactly helped by the fact that not only did I see it coming a mile away, both parties were pretty much exclusively in the wrong, so I wasn't exactly sure on who to root for going into it. And number 2, it's my list, I'll do as I please. So just a small recap. Multiple scuffles, some teases, a kiss in the pale moonlight, and an intercom threat over the speakers later, the bout was set, and all hell was guaranteed to freeze over before anybody walked out without throwing a single punch. Seriously, Tori has to be one of the most emotionally volatile people on the entire face of the show. One little inconvenience, and everybody dies. And I guess that's actually a perfect leeway into the actual fight with it itself, because oh the drama in this bout. I mean, shot for shot, frame by frame, pixel by pixel, what more could I say about this entire fight sequence that hasn't already been mentioned in multiple news articles? The fight on its own is a tremendous feat of cinematography, stunt work, humor, and genuine shock, watching all members of both dojos practically get on each other's nerves and wreck anyone and everyone that gets in the way. Dimitri humiliates Hulk thanks to muscle memory, Kristen ass-face Mitch get into a short but competitive duke-out, Miguel and Robbie get to round 2 to scrap the ever-loving paint up each other, Tori and Sam finally get to tear each other's hairs out after teasing for 6 straight episodes in a row. It was like a series of semi-trucks stuffed with atomic bombs in the back of the trailer, crashing into one another over and over and over and over again. On top of that, this level of violence was further escalated by the very thing it was caused by, a conflict of ideologies. Yes, you can take the simple route and say it started with a kiss, but really, a fight of this magnitude was a ticking time bomb just waiting to explode. The different philosophies of both dojos amplifying the personality characteristics of each of its members, thus only just moving them away from the gray area, really shines through. You want to root for someone, but you also have a reason to hate everyone for either escalating the situation or simply just getting involved. But let's be honest now, guys, I think you know why it gets this high up on the list in the first place. I mean, I couldn't exactly put this on the list without even mentioning this at the very least, right? So check out this parallel, right? Robbie was forgiving towards his opponent at the tournament, but Miguel didn't exactly share the same mentality, further injuring his opponent to achieve victory. With the roles now reversed here, Miguel again has Robbie right where he wants him, but then he does something unthinkable in the context of Cobra Kai. He shows mercy. In that moment, Robbie couldn't hold in his grief, anger, insecurities, whatever, and lashes out even further, kicking Miguel off the banisters and damn near killing him. It is very tricky to pull off a double heel face turn, but just like Steve Austin and Bret Hart, they managed to pull it off wonderfully. Miguel's reluctance and mercy admittedly persevered and kept his humanity intact, while Robbie's understandable but irreverent post-match brutality turned him into the biggest dick for the next few episodes, maybe even for the rest of the show. Assuming Kreese and Toy doesn't find a way to usurp her, which I guarantee they will. It's very ironic and sincere within itself when you consider the path that all these kids were on before the series started and where they are right now. Especially since, again, this was a scenario where everybody lost. Tori got screwed over and expelled, Dimitri and Hulk lost the best friend in each other, Ayesha was forced to move to another school, Stingray got put on house arrest, Robbie was forced to go on the run, Sam was suffering from PTSD, oh, and yeah, Miguel nearly died! It broke Johnny amongst any sign of recollection, and Daniel was forced to shut down his dojo, and his dealership started getting less and less customers throughout the day. The only person who actually ended up getting anything out of this was Kreese. At least he got his dojo back. I mean, look, I wouldn't blame some people for calling the whole affair a middling barrage with an inventive, if not shocking, finish. But that finish is BANANAS, and the build-up was seeded cleverly throughout, and it snowballed into the perfect storm with hardly a crack in between. It remains, at least right now, my favorite moment in the entire series. But there is one thing so far about this series that I enjoyed a little bit more than that. Maybe. Let's see. And number 1, the enemy of my enemy. At this point, I should probably just say that Robbie Keane is my favorite character in the entire series. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. For me, out of all the other characters in the series who have the most heartaches or the most pain or the most tears to spread to, Robbie isn't just my favorite character in the series, he's the one with the most potential and has the most consistent storyline going into Season 4. And while Tando Buchanan's versatile performance from troubled, persistent do-gooder to Anakin Skywalker 2.0 is something that I can appreciate, there's another core reason for why he naps my top spot. 3 words. Long-term storytelling. Ever since his inclusion into the series and the Karate Kid franchise as a whole, Keane has remained as polarizing as he is mysterious as he is brash. But the biggest strength of his character and his arc going forward is his connection to Johnny and Daniel, and I guess I could say everybody else he surrounds himself with, because the inner dexterity of his personality helps to further broaden out the depth of each of his situations, which already makes him an interesting character throughout, because not only is he similar to his father when he was his age, but he had a dysfunctional family life from the day he was born. Don't get me wrong, Robbie made a terrible decision by throwing a cheap shot at Miguel, but honestly, what more do you expect from the guy? His father didn't bother showing up since day one, his mom neglected him by fooling around with a lot of boyfriends, he had little to no food or drinks at the house, and he had thugs for friends. And you could argue that things actually got worse when Johnny actually stepped back into his life and Robbie let karate in. Now, sure, say what you will about Johnny, but the man actually did make an effort to try and repair his fractured relationship piece by piece. Daniel actually gave Robbie a home and a way to channel and combat all that restraining hatred he's felt all those years. Sure, Robbie may have started out in Miyagi-Do for all the wrong reasons, but he did eventually learn to accept the ways of traditional karate and even take in the spirituality and those ideals. But the anger and darkness from his household and his broken family manifested way too deep. And it's such a damn shame because Season 2, he was doing so well. All that respect, all that admiration, all that effort going into actually trying trying to be better, and it went downhill the moment he put Miguel in the hospital. Daniel effectively slammed the door in his face for the final time. Johnny keeps going back on his promises, and Sam still had feelings for Miguel. The kid is basically left all alone again. He's sick and tired of people using him as a prop or just flat out stabbing him in the back. He's got the heart of a Miyagi-Do, but the blood of a Cobra Kai, and deliberately putting him on the back burner for the 3rd season was an excellent move for the sake of the story going forward. In fact, speaking of season 3, I loved how they gave each character a specific journey and it culminating in them making a major decision on where they would be for the start of season 4. Daniel and Johnny teaming up, Sam overcoming her PTSD, Hawk finally choosing his friends over fame, and of course Robbie joining Cobra Kai. It was a well-paced season and a well-written season that placed most of the central characters exactly where they belonged, and in my opinion, Robbie belongs in Cobra Kai. If he hadn't seen Johnny hugging Miguel at the beginning of the 1st season, he may well have joined Cobra Kai right then and there. And speaking of which, for anybody wondering what I think might occur for season 4, that is a perfect lead into what I think is going to happen. I can make a whole list worth of what I believe could occur, but I'd be here all day if that was the case. All I'm going to say, though, are 2 things. 1, that Cobra Kai is going to win. And 2, that Robbie is going to be the one who wins it for them. If there's anybody who needs that win the most, it's definitely him. Not just for the dojo, but to prove it to himself. As of right now, I'm not going to go so far as to say there's no hope for Robbie, because we all know it's going to happen eventually. But sometimes, in order to go back to the light, you have to embrace the darkness. At the risk of stating the blatantly obvious, at time of recording, this is probably the most binge-watchable series I've grown attached to since How to Get Away with Murder and Squid Game, and that within itself is no small feat. In all honesty, there really is no reason this series should have been as good as it is, but here we are. On the offhand, nothing about this season is perfect under any circumstances, and let's just say I'm not entirely confident with everything they plan to go forward with in the near future, but this series has done enough good already to make me believe that no matter what happens, they'll always have us coming back for more. Everything has a payoff, moments feel earned, and it's impossible to not care about anything that's going on here. I mean, I got nothing else to say, man. See you all next year, peeps.